Everybody sounds like they're ready to rock and roll. Excellent. All right, remember the mission of the Great Falls International Airport Authority is to optimize transportation services and development in the region, and our vision is to maximize the airport's benefit to our region. Everybody is welcome. We appreciate your presence, and if you have any comments throughout the meeting, please stand, state your name, address, and their comments will be heard. With the quorum of the board present, I call this meeting to order. Roll call. Commissioner Aritz.
Here.
Commissioner Bakke is here. Commissioner Evans.
Here.
Commissioner Gibbs.
Here.
Commissioner Lalonde.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Timbo.
Here.
How about that? Everybody's here. Let's start off with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll start off with the consent agenda, which is made up of routine day-to-day items, require board action, but do not appear to have significant public impact. Items may be pulled from the consent agenda for separate discussion and vote by any board member. First item A, approval of board meeting minutes from October 2021. B, payroll checks totaling $119,761.59. C, maintenance and operation checks number 26373 to 26436 totaling $288,165.80. D, approved passenger facility charge totaling $46,302.17. And E, financial reports for October 2021. Are there any items that the board would like to be pulled for further discussion? That being said, can I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
And have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as read. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Consent agenda passes. Director's report.
Thanks, everybody. Happy November. A couple things to report on. We continue to have some discussions with the airlines relative to 2022. Right now it looks as though our best opportunities for growth are really with United. They currently are flying 2 Denver a day, but they plan to go to a 3rd Denver in February. They're ideally hoping to get a 76-seater on the route in that early part of the year, potentially even January, that might come. And then that would continue on as they get to 3 flights a day. Their goal is to get to 4 flights a day over the summer, with 2 of those being 76-seaters. But as we all know, there's just, everything continues to be in flux. Business travel just hasn't recovered. Passenger demand continues to ebb and flow with the various daily COVID updates. The Canadian traffic is starting to come back in, but it's not a wave. It's kind of like a rising tide, more than a wave. And there's some rumors that the testing requirements are going to discontinue after the holidays because it's too difficult for the Canadians to find access to those tests a lot of places. And unlike us on this side of the border that get free tests because of the stimulus stuff that was done after in the last administration, the Canadians have to pay up to $150 a pop to get those tests per person. So for a family of 4, and that's pretty high. Because of all those unknowns and the pilot shortage on top of it, nothing will really be cemented until we get closer to those dates. But they are analyzing the schedule for spring right now, and so some of the changes we see over the next 2 weeks are likely to be close to what we're going to get, at least for spring. There's potential for some Chicago flying this summer, probably not daily, but it's possible we might have on the market some this summer, which would be great. I emailed the Visitors Bureau and the Chamber this morning, just kind of telling everybody where things were, and we'll probably want to put some advertising dollars in those 2 markets, Chicago and Denver, if we do see those sizable increases. So that's really encouraging. We're working with a couple of other leads that still will be 2022 service. Not really anything that is imminent. We have one conversation that will start right at the first of the year we'll have about 2022. That would be a new carrier So we'll see how that goes here in a few weeks. On to the audit. We have been having some discussions with our auditor. They got a late start with some COVID problems on their team, which got us a little behind the 8 ball immediately. A couple weeks ago, like 2 weeks ago, they told us that our new accounting system does not download into their audit form that they had built for us many moons ago off of our old Blackfoot system. So a lot of the schedules that are in our normal audit that are supplementary schedules, like the cost center stuff in the back, they're unable to generate that. They're having a hard time mapping it to our new accounting software. So they're proposing that those wouldn't be in there, which I think is probably fine. But Sydney and I have been working. Some of that data we need to develop, some of the things they're having a hard time developing are the account. The revenue account structure that goes into the way we normally produce the management discussion and analysis. We'd like to have that line item granularity so we can really look at the business in those perspectives, and also it's needed for the airline rates and charges analysis. And so Sydney's doing some recreation after the fact to try and map that stuff. We may ultimately change some of the account structure in QuickBooks to make it easier to do that going forward. David had done some things with item numbers that we're not really sure that's a good method of doing it. We may have to go back and set up some new revenue accounts and kind of retrofit the financials a little more to what we need for rates and charges and for financial reporting. So the audit has been kind of slow going. We just are now getting the numbers that go in the MD&A even this week. It does look like we crested $4 million in revenue, which I think that's only about the third time we've ever done that. I think when I joined, we were running around 2.2, 2.3 million. So it's good to see that revenue number coming back. A lot of the increase is because of the FedEx holdover, because they haven't been able to shove that thing out the other end of the FedEx machine to get it implemented. So we have some extra revenue there. But that's not something we'll continue to see going forward. It will come down some once we get that deal signed. But for the current year, that's good news. It offsets some of the lost revenue on parking. Rental cars, surprisingly, are pretty much recovered, which is encouraging, and that tells me that we are seeing tourism in our market. And so that's positive. Food and beverage, I was shocked how well they did. With less passengers, they're able to close the gap. And so some encouraging things are coming out of the financials, at least a little bit, dribs and drabs I've seen so far, of how the year ended up. I'm pretty encouraged by it. So I think going forward, there's a lot of exciting news there that points to even higher revenue once we get out the other end. Get parking recovered now that we're making more money every month off the parking than we were before. It should be good for us financially, and so positive news there. You may have seen the news reports. We found out practically right before the Senator Tester announcement that we were getting $9.5 million out of the infrastructure bill. There's not a lot of form to that yet. There's still a lot of discussion about how that money will come to us and when it would come to us and what the stipulations around it would be. My read of it is it's going to come through the AIP program through our normal grant cycle. And so it'll be a doubling or maybe a little bit more than doubling of the money we have access to every year for the next 5 years. That's kind of how the money will come. Whether or not we'll be able to go ahead 1 year and get more of it, the next year get less of it. None of that has been worked out. Whether or not there'll be a match required, boy, it sure seems silly to give everybody a bunch of money and then make them match it when the revenues are all down. But that seems to be where we're headed. Nonetheless, we'll find out more in the next few weeks. It comes at a good time as we embark on some of the terminal work. This money should be available for the majority of the work that we need to do on the terminal, whether that's renovating the facade. We've talked to the FAA quite a bit about a facade renovation that we talked about a couple of years ago. You may remember the renderings. That would give us an opportunity to install some insulated panel on some of that concrete, replace some of these nearly 50-year-old windows, and really get some energy efficiencies out of the building while we change the way it looks. And so we think there's a good project there that these funds can be used for, and so we'll be continuing those discussions with FAA. Concurrently, and on the agenda, you've seen our PFC application. It's time for us to reapply for our PFC. I shouldn't say it is a reapplication, but more or less what you have to do is give the FAA a list of projects that you intend to use the money on. The airlines get a chance to comment. It's not an approval, it's just a comment, but as long as it's eligible, there's typically not any further steps in that. So we'll be cutting off pieces of the terminal that we put into that PFC application. Now that the debt service is paid off on the PFCs we're paying for prior on the old terminal ramp, that gives us about $600,000 a year that we can put into terminal work to help with that program. And so we're in the midst of putting that application together. The FAA has asked for some additional information, which I provided yesterday. They want to look at it. This building is approaching 50 years old. It's not 50 years old yet. And so nonetheless, they want to look at it for a SHPO to see if there's any potential there would be anything historic in the front of the building that we need to preserve. I've pointed out that that's not really applicable until 24 or 25, depending on how you count 50 years. But nonetheless, they want to look at it. I guess we've moved to a 47-year schedule now instead of 50, but they want to look at it and check off that square. So we're waiting on that. But ideally, we're going to have an airline consultation maybe before the new year if we can get the FAA on board with the airlines, and then from there, there's a required congressional waiting period where the public can comment. No one's ever commented that I'm aware of anywhere, but it'll be in the National Register and that kind of thing. And so then we begin collecting on that PFC application sometime around March. Because now that we've had a couple months of foot dragging since we started the application, we're going to have to file for an extension on our current application, probably about a 1 month, 2 month extension, so we can continue to collect on our old application. It's not a big deal. That money, we can continue to put it towards projects we had in the old application, or if there isn't any project money left, we can hold that money over and use it for a new application. We just need to continue our collection authority through the holidays until we can get the new application in place. So we worked on that this morning and sent the FAA a letter on that. So we've got on the terminal side, we'll be putting in some type of environmental process over the next few weeks, most likely the next 2 or 3 weeks. Even though the entirety of the program for next year is renewal and replacement, we're going to take out existing concrete and replace existing concrete. We're going to take down existing signs and replace them with new signs. We're going to take out carpet and replace it with new carpet. We're going to replace the door on the end of the building with a new door. The FAA has decided they do want to do an environmental review of it. So we're going to have to submit that project for before the deadline for environmental review, which I think is January 14th this year, isn't it? So accordingly, we're going to have to come to a business meeting prior to the Christmas party so that the board has acted on that project and we can officially send it forward to the FAA for environmental review. I'm not sure that we'll get anything more than a checklist out of that. They'll go through and say it doesn't affect stormwater, it doesn't affect, but nonetheless, they've decided they need to do that. So we'll have that item on the agenda along with, ideally, we're going to get the finance committee together here in the next 2 weeks prior to the Christmas party and have a meeting. And then we'll have those notes on that agenda also so we can accept the notes from the finance committee. That sets us up to approve the audit at the January meeting if they can get it produced that quickly. So we are a little behind on that audit this year. Not much we could do. I think the auditor was just overwhelmed. Airline agreement. Just today we sent out another reminder to the airlines that we want to get the airline agreement signed in the next couple of weeks. We have offered to them the drawings of where their new space will be in the expanded terminal ticket counter area, and we've kind of laid out what the seniority pecking order is for choosing those spaces. I don't know if anybody will want to move. There might be a little bit of something there with of Delta and United trying to decide where they want to be. So we'll wait and see if anybody wants to move. But once we get the airlines okay, we can start formal drawings of their space so we can begin to move that project towards bid. We have a pretty good concept for the baggage claim area that I think will work well. We've got some refining to do on that. The architects are working on that right now. But possibly by January, we should be able to bring to the board some drawings of what that will look like. Essentially, what we'll have is the two ticket counters. We'll split it down the middle. There'll be two bag belts that come to the middle, go down a bag path down the middle, and connect into the TSA system back there. We've proposed to the TSA that we go ahead and build an inline system immediately, rather than we initially thought we would probably do a phased approach, and we would have a standalone system initially, which would have some roller belts, and the airlines would pull the bag belt to the FAA, or bag to the FAA. FAA would screen them and then put it out on another roller belt for the airline to pick up. But because we're all on one level and it's a pretty concise system, there's not much to it. It would be pretty easy to go directly to a powered inline system where we would just have bag belts that move the bag right into the machine. It would be screened, and then it would go out to a small carousel for the airlines to pick up. So we're proposing that the TSA would go directly to that system. They may have some money in the infrastructure bill. We've asked, if there might be some money that we can access to do that system. It would be a very small system for what they normally do. In addition, our two screening machines that are down there expire in 2024. So they're going to have to bring new equipment out here in that time frame anyway. So our thought is, why not bring one machine that would go into that inline system rather than replacing both of the existing machines, and then 5 or 6 years from now buying another new machine that would then come into an inline system. It makes more sense just to make the leap and get it all done at once. And so we'll continue to have some discussions with TSA about that potential, but that would be ideal. And like I said, January timeframe, hopefully we'll have some drawings we can share with everybody. Parking, we're continuing to refine the parking operation out there. We definitely have a good sense of the issues that the customers are facing. One of them is the card readers are swipe card readers, but they look a lot like the chip readers at the gas station, where you leave the card in. In these machines, if you leave your card in, it just doesn't read them, and eventually cancels your entire operation. You have to kind of start over there with the card. We're going to have some new printing done on the face of those machines that say insert and quickly remove card, so that people are clear what needs to happen. We're going to have a little bit different graphic on there to kind of get rid of some of the stuff that's confusing people. There's one little hole in the top of it that people are shoving money into for some reason. We've got to cover that up. Just simple things that, until you watch what somebody does with the machine, you would never have thought of. So we've got to get a couple of those cleaned up. We had a switch fail this last weekend in one of the routers, best way I can describe it, in the parking hut. Took us about a day and a half to find that, and it simply needed to reset the switch. It looked like we had a problem with our main internet connection. Turns out it may not have been that. It actually was two simultaneous different things. And so I think we're going to replace that switch with something that would send us an immediate notice that the connection to the internet isn't working. The switches we have now are just dumb switches. They have a light on them, but unless you're over there and see that there's a problem, you wouldn't necessarily know it was there. And so we can get a little bit more reliable switch for about $200, and it would actually send us a note to say it's failed. So those are the kinds of things I think we've got to continue to refine that operation from a manned operation where there's somebody sitting there and to, you know, an operation where we don't have anyone there day to day. And that way we'll increase the amount of decrease the amount of time it takes to fix some of these issues and increase the customer service side of it. Other than that, I mean, machines seem to be operating pretty well day to day. You know, we're definitely seeing quite a bit more revenue, both from passengers returning and from not having the concessionaire running a lot. So that's encouraging, but we still need to continue to refine some of that operation, make it a little more user friendly.
How many interactions are you getting every day from the people that need help out there that are pushing the button?
I would say there's 3 or 4 every flight. Wouldn't you, Rod?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Up to each flight.
Yeah, a few each flight, and the majority of them are leaving their card in the machine. You know, probably the next most popular thing is they put the ticket in upside down or around the wrong way. Even though that drawing is right there, they're still putting it in and not quite getting it right. So most of those can be resolved over the phone pretty quickly. Our guys are just, you know, telling, you know, are you sure the mag strips up and to the right? You know, but the credit card one, it's hard to talk somebody through it. You know, I mean, the guys sometimes will, you know, be able to do that. Other times they have to go out there, you know, because the passenger's convinced the credit card reader doesn't work. And, you know, every time I've gone over there and done it with somebody, I swipe it and it goes right away. So I think it's changing some of the wording on there and the graphics. We're also going to ask if we can reprogram the SD card that has the verbal prompt on it, because right now it says insert credit card. So I think if that was changed to insert quickly remove credit card, people would kind of get it if they're listening to that. You know, I think some of it's just, you know, getting people through there multiple times too, because many people haven't ever used those machines before.
And that's a big deal, because the gas pumps too, it goes both ways. So the ones that have the good one that says insert and remove, you get it right away. But if that doesn't say, you go, all right, 3 tries later, you finally figure it out.
Yeah, and most of Great Falls now, the card wants to stay in there. It's a chip reader and it wants to hold on to it. The problem, we could move these to chip readers, and maybe eventually we would. The biggest problem with the chip reader is the transaction takes quite a bit longer. You know, the swipe timer, the read is a fraction. It's like 1/10 of the amount of time of the chip read. You know, so when, you know, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when we get a line of Allegiant out there and they're 2 or 3 deep in every lane, you know, a read that's that much slower backs another car or 2 into it, and then it looks like a big line. Right now, we'll have to get a report. We've been up and running on the phone app for about a month. You know, and I don't know how much usage we're getting in that. If we can get a lot of usage in that, Rod and I have found a location where you can put a new exit out there so that those people can peel out and not go through the toll plaza, which I think would be a good improvement to make eventually once we get enough people on that phone app paying. You know, but I haven't seen yet. We'll have to see how many, you know, offhand, Sydney, how many are going through there? I don't either. So we'll have to look at that and see how many people are utilizing that. Because that is a nice feature. You can sit down there and pay and bag claim relatively quickly, but you still have to insert that card somewhere to get yourself out. If we get them out of the toll plaza, that gives us a lot more capacity on the toll plaza. And the other option we always have, you know, if we think that that's a good solution, we can always stick a pay machine in the lobby also. And you know, but again, it still relies on them to get the ticket into the machine. It'd be nice if we could move that operation off to the side so they don't even go to the toll plaza. And if you think about it, that gives us almost 20% more capacity because the toll plaza already has 4 lanes. So, you know, so that's a future plan. Once the parking operation, you know, and revenue returns, we've got a little bit of extra money we can reinvest. You know, putting a toll exit out on the side for, you know, prepaid parking would be great. So.
There's typically also a revenue difference between dipping and swiping.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
He didn't mention that.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Which is cheaper?
I can't say right now. I don't recall.
Shipping or swiping?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I think eventually there'll be so much ubiquity to that chip reader that, you know, we'll want to go that direction. But 2 of the machines we already had, you know, were swipe, and so. And then when he told me the time difference, I'm like, wow, I don't really want, you know, more time. But, you know, I think we'll see how the signage goes and the prompt on the SD cards, because I think if we've given people enough of an indication they need to get their card right back out, you know, that's going to fix, I mean, I would guess it's probably 2/3 of our problems, wouldn't you, Rod?
Yeah. Most
Yeah,
of them.
it seems to be about 2/3 of the problems. We also have a mobile unit. When the system went down the other day, we actually had to send our Leo out there with a mobile unit to process the parking transactions because the machines wouldn't process anything. And so we have that unit too that's independent of that system, allows us to go out and do some of that stuff manually. Let's see, the other thing I was going to mention, we have quite a few new hires. Laura, maybe you could give us an update on, you know, on all of that and in the last month.
Yep, Brian Ike started, he's our new LEO. He started right at the end of October. And JJ Wright started yesterday, he's our new mechanic. And then we have another LEO starting mid-December. And that's it.
How many Leos are we gonna have full-time?
4.
4 full-time?
Yep.
Yeah, so 2 of those are new positions altogether, and then the mechanic was a replacement, and then we're still looking for a maintenance employee to replace Tori. So we're still 1 short, but we're making progress on hiring. And the majority of those, all but 1, right, are from out of state.
Yeah, those are all out of state.
You still have a contract security people?
Yeah, they're still supplementing until we can get a full scheduled, trained up LEO function going. We'll still have Securitas, and even after that, we'll probably try to keep them in for a shift or 2, well, a couple shifts a week, so that we have coverage for
Backup.
vacation, sick time, holiday pay, you know, that kind of thing. I'm hopeful that schedule will work out, because in my experience, and those of you that run a 24-hour operation know, you need 5 full-time people to run a 24/7, you know, shift, to give you some overlap, some sick time, some vacation, and we're likely to try and stay at 4 for a while, and then use Securitas to make up that sort of 5th person. The nice thing about that is that 5th person might only be 32 hours a week, you know, or you know, 28 hours a week some weeks, and then other weeks they might be, you know, that function might flex up to 60 because we've got, you know, somebody's getting medical procedure, somebody's getting vacation, you know. So that's the nice thing about having Securitas still in here is it gives us some staffing flexibility at a much lower cost.
And Kent doesn't count into those numbers, right?
No, Ken is one of the 4.
He is one of them.
Yeah, he is one of the 4.
Really?
So yeah, we've got a total of 4. Yep.
Maybe we should get 4 plus Kent. Then he wouldn't have.
Then we got 5.
I know. I need all that. All right. I didn't realize he was one of those 4. Okay.
Yeah. Is that it?
Yeah.
Get all of them? Okay. So yeah, you know, but for an organization our size, that's quite a bit of new personnel. So it's pretty exciting to have people interested in coming to work here. So let's see, audit and that. I think that's it.
You talked about the United increases. Anything on Alaska or Delta
Nothing yet.
that they want to bring in or increase or change?
No, there's still no real visibility into MSP. You know, they hope to have it back in March, you know, but you know, like any of them right now, I don't think any of the airlines can commit to anything in March. You know, no one's looking that far ahead yet. So hopefully that'll be back in March. You know, we still remain a pro-rate market for Delta, so SkyWest controls Salt Lake completely. And, you know, from what I understand, you know, they eventually want to stop doing prorate. So we're still kind of in that odd situation. The problem is, you know, under the pilot contract, my understanding is Delta doesn't have a lot of extra routes they can add. They're limited in the number of 50-seat markets that they can have under their flag. You know, so that's why they use the prorate program, is because the profit and loss and everything is really handled by SkyWest, and they only get to use the Delta code share. So it doesn't count under the restrictions of the pilot contract. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, maybe if COVID continues to weigh on some of these markets that have a lot of business travel in them. Maybe there would be some opportunities for some of that pruning to eventually help us here where we have a lot of leisure travel. It's hard to say what needs to change. Well, we need more pilots, I mean, that's evident. But that doesn't change quickly. I don't have a lot of insight into that. Alaska, I think, will be back to 2 flights here relatively shortly after the, probably about that same March time frame. We'll be back to 2 a day, which is really, I mean, it's great to have them 2 a day. We need to get them to 3 a day eventually in order for us to have them in the market on Alaska. That's really kind of the marker they use. If you've got 3 Seattle a day, that's when they start looking at you for other markets. That's kind of what their historic thinking has always been. But getting them back to 2 a day, year round would be ideal. And maybe with Canadian traffic coming back, that's a possibility next year, particularly if we continue to have capacity problems with Salt Lake. California, it's a reasonable substitute to go to Seattle rather than Salt Lake. Even though it's a little bit further, so hopefully, Alaska will benefit from the capacity issues that some of the other carriers have. Certainly they have been thus far, but they're out of seats now too. I mean, literally everyone is out of seats.
Yeah. You can't even fly in and out of here.
No.
So
No.
John, is there any opportunity to get Alaska to get back to a
Morning.
daytime flight or morning? I've been trying to go on Alaska and I can't get past Seattle.
Yep.
There's no connections.
Yep.
And it's just, so it just feels like you're stuck with 2 choices.
So when they drop to that 1 a day here, we share that flight with Kalispell. And so Kalispell is a much bigger Alaska market. Their market share is much higher. And so, they give that market preference on that plane. So it gets the morning turn, we get the afternoon turn. And I do think they really want to get to 2 a day, but in the current environment, I don't see them getting there.
Yeah, but that 5 o'clock departure out here, I mean, it's worthless. So I consider it a 0 flight.
Yeah, well, they're filling
I couldn't
it.
get California or at all.
Yeah, no, it's not great for
It was a
their,
26-hour flight.
yeah, it's not great for their brand, and we keep pointing that out to them, that, it's tough to, for them to grow market share, but yeah, I mean, it's just everything's chock-a-block full right now. No one has anything. I mean, to give you an idea, United last month said they averaged for the month 94% load. I mean, that's nearly impossible. Just the number of people that, decide they're not going to wear a mask when they get here or get here too late to get on the plane, that's, and so everybody's at that, that 90%, market share right now, or load factor right now, so. And even if there were ever a time, when you could make money doing flying, with high fare and 90% load, I mean, boy, there's every impetus in the world to do it. They just simply can't do it. It's too tight. So
Go to Helena or Bozeman and you'll get the connection you want. That's what I do.
I won't cross that line.
Well,
My loyalty is to this airport.
and Helena's completely full too. I mean, that's what we heard today too. Is there isn't any capacity. The only place there is capacity might be Bozeman.
Yeah.
Because down, I mean, again, this is back to the, why the incentive for our market is so important. And every one of the airlines, if you asked them, would tell you they have more capacity in Bozeman than they need, but they have to have it due to competition. Right? It makes no sense. But unless we get some blood in the water up here, it's just not going to happen.
I came back from Denver on Southwest into Bozeman the other day, which was like, wow, I didn't even know they went in there. It was half full zone.
I think it's supposed to discontinue January. It might be February. Yeah. It's seasonal, but I mean, it's a pretty long season. Yeah. Avella announced they're not coming back up there, but that's the only, and then Billings lost Frontier completely, I think. Yeah, everything else up there that's been put in seems to be staying, whether or not it's doing well, so.
And on better side of news, what do you have update for When's Love opening in Airport Avenue B paving update? Sorry about that.
Everything I hear is Airport Avenue B was paved by accident, which we need an accident like that. Somebody needs to come pave our road. You know, so that's what we're told, is it was done by accident by the contractor because they were paving that road behind and they just thought they were supposed to pave the other road. My guess is it's probably more of an amendment because of the traffic they were putting on Airport Avenue B. Somebody at some level said, well, you know, we need to use Airport Avenue B, and it's in bad shape, so we'll repair it. Oftentimes that could happen at the project manager level, you know, where, you know, somebody locally says, well, you know, you can use it, but you got to fix it, and so they just fix it. You know, so that's what we're told. You know, we've kind of read Loves the Riot Act over, you know, we absolutely will not tolerate trucks coming on the airport road there. You know, we've got to figure out, you know, what we need to do to post that for no trucks. We'll ticket everybody that comes off of it. You know, whatever it is, we got to keep them off there because that's going to be a hell of a mess for the man guys trying to get out of there if those trucks are coming out and banging lefts, you know, into traffic. You know, like they do at the interchange up here. So we'll definitely be working on that. In terms of the date, last I heard was December 10th or something, wasn't it, Ron?
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
It's kind of a moving target now.
I talked to a couple contractors and there's still some.
Yeah.
It looks good from the road.
Yeah, it's getting close. And it was going to be before Thanksgiving. I think it was like November 14th was the original date, but they've kind of fallen off schedule. So you know, they're definitely getting close. I saw they were doing some work on the scales. They still were trying to get some flat work done. Luckily, they had warm temperatures because they're still getting asphalt and they're still getting concrete on site. So, you know, but I got to think they're probably.
I'd say in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. But you know, we'll reach back out to them and see if there's any word.
Do you want to talk about the light industrial update?
Oh yeah, that's thanks, Chris. So the well, why don't you mention it?
So as you guys know, we went out for bid for getting the steel casings for water and sewer for the development that the airport will be looking at. We finished the water line steel casing last week. They're starting on the sewer line right now. Those are the giant 30-inch steel crossings that they are directionally drilling under the frontage road.
They're huge. You can crawl through them.
You can crawl through them. Yep.
Yeah, and so about midway through there, as we suspected, it's just solid rock, so it's pretty good. Some days they only get a foot.
They get a foot like an hour at best.
They got the one done and they're just setting up for the second one now.
Yeah, it's a pretty tough one. But the good news about that is come spring we'll be able to bid the entire utility project independent of all approvals, independent of all other contractors. So they will have a clean field and they can go right out and put the pipe right through and have the schedule completely under their control. So that's encouraging and a good first step towards getting those utilities in. As we get closer to spring and we bid that project out, we get our time frame set up for the utilities. We'll be talking to Dick Anderson about time frame for buildings. And ideally by this time next year, there should be structure up, which is pretty exciting.
John, what's that lot with all the Ashley furniture trucks out there? Is that airport?
Yeah, that was our that was our RV storage lot. We just got the sign up, I think, and about a week later, the Ashley folks called and asked if they could store trucks there, and so we said, well, sure. But then they came back and said, we don't really want to be next to RVs. Can we just have the entire lot? So they took the entire lot. So we're working on now a new lot down in the flight path of 17. Yeah, this little parcel of land that's kind of off to the side here. When Love's was taking down some of that pond dirt, we had to dump it out there in kind of some mounds.
Yeah, the filter.
Yeah, to kind of enclose that area, so we kind of have kind of a mounded area, and then our plan is to spread some millings. We have a bunch of millings left over from, what project was that, Rod?
It was the road project.
2018 road.
2015 landside.
Loop Road.
Yeah, we have a bunch of those millings that we're going to take out there and spread, and then put just a gate in with probably a chain across it, and have that for RV storage. So we're going to try again to get a little RV storage lot, since the city is moving ahead with taking off the RVs and campers and whatnot out of the streets. You know, there'll be demand. You know, and so having a little lot over there. And then, you know, when we have something like that, I mean, this is what happens. Someone calls us and, you know, I mean, what is that lot worth now? Laura, is that 40 a year?
2,500 a month.
2,500 a month, you know, just to have those trucks out there.
Nice.
We have almost nothing invested in it, so. So yeah, we'll do the same thing here. You know, we got some dirt moved for free. And Rod, I know you've been working on the millings. Are we close to getting that out there?
Not very close.
Not very close yet. Trying to find somebody to haul those over there for us. So, but yeah, ideally we'll have a little RV storage lot over there, probably $20 a month. You know, generate a little bit of cash.
Oh, it's higher than that.
25, is it?
No, go up.
Yeah?
Our sign said
Even-
25.
Well, that's what was.
We already made a sign.
I bet you can get 75.
75? Even if we don't give you a light out there, you gotta supply your own headlights?
That's how much we should be charging, is that what you think?
I have never paid less than 75 a month anywhere.
Really?
The only place I paid 25 a month was on a military base.
Exactly.
So there's probably some room we can go up a little bit.
That's really.
Well, you can change that 2 to a 7 very easily.
That's dirt cheap for a
It is.
rental, for a storage lot
Yeah.
space.
There you go.
Behind a locked fence.
We're locked. I was gonna say, we're light on amenities out there. I mean, you know, there's gonna be rabbits living in your wheel.
I'd say 50, I mean, you don't have a rolling electric gate that they pull up to, so maybe 50.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go below
What's one of
50.
that?
Well, they're not behind the fence.
No, it's not fully fenced.
It's out, and that was the other one is
Oh, it's
too.
not fully
It's not
locked?
fenced and secure.
Well, there's a huge ditch on one side, dirt mounds surrounding the rest of it. So I mean, somebody could get in there and try to steal a rig, but they would never come out in one piece.
Make a
You know.
boat. Boat around it.
And you might have a rattlesnake under it once in a while.
Well, now that could definitely happen.
That should
I
be
mean,
posted for that.
Usually what's so expensive, because you need a lot of space. You
And
need a
fence.
huge space in the middle for people to
Yeah.
line up, and then
It's very
you
inefficient.
need 3 times the space for
Yeah.
park one.
And fencing is absolutely insane
Yeah.
right now too.
I didn't realize you were going to fence the whole thing.
No, our plan is that, you know, and that's what we did with the Ashley one. If you go out there, all we did was mound dirt, you know, so it's basically a mounded area, you know, out there. And so that's kind of what we plan to do now is, you know, we'll just mound it around, you know, and that makes it easy to expand if we get enough demand, you know, because there's quite a bit of space out there that we could expand, so.
Move the dirt piles back.
Yep, just the dozer out, move it.
So John, back to the audit, way back at the
Yeah.
beginning. I had a couple questions, if I heard you correctly. So should we have anticipated our new accounting system wouldn't work with the, or I'm not quite sure I understand that.
Well, the way that they described it is, you know, years ago when they started on that engagement, they built some type, you know, some macros that came out of Blackfoot right into, you know, the forms they use for our audit.
Yeah.
And what they're saying is they don't want to recreate that more or less for, you know, the supplementary schedules that aren't required. You know, and so, you know, we've talked about, you know, I mean, is that a bait and switch a little bit with our last proposal? I mean, you know, I wish they would have mentioned that when they, you know, when they were, you know, they knew we were changing accounting systems. I mean,
Right.
you know, we've definitely been talking to them about that for what, 2-3 years now.
Exactly.
That's what I was-
You know, but basically what they're saying is, and you know, and realistically, those cost center schedules, we don't really need them in the audit, and they're not doing us much good. We don't really talk that way about the performance of the organization. And if we can generate it, I think on the expense side, we can generate it off of QuickBooks, you know, pretty readily, you know, for our rates and charges needs. On the revenue side, we need more minutia, you know, because if you really think about our revenue, every piece of our revenue has a different driver. The land rents, you all control the land rents. I mean, we could generate 10% more land rent tomorrow by raising the rate. Almost every lease we have gives you the control to do that. You know, so, you know, that's a different driver than food and beverage, which requires a passenger, which is a different driver than parking, which requires an outbound passenger versus a rental car, which is an inbound passenger. So each one of those line items kind of needs to be, you know, contained in a single account that we can pull levers on as we forecast out 10 or 15 years. And so Blackfoot never really did a good job of mapping to our rates and charges. You know, and so we were hoping to fix that in the with the new system. You know, but I think the problem that our auditors is having is they would have to go in and recreate all of those relationships to get some of those schedules. And so, you know, Sydney, why don't you?
Really?
Yeah. Why don't you give it a shot? I mean, you know, we had this discussion. Is it fair of us to say you have to go and recreate all those forms again? You know, and like I said, a lot of it in the back we don't use. The cost center stuff that's in the normal back side of our audit doesn't really get used for anything. So I don't think we need that. On the revenue side, I think we are going to have to push back and say, no, you know, we are going to need that information always, you know, to help us talk about what, you know, and analyze what the year was and forecast forward and all those things.
Because it would seem to be something when we're RFPing, but I can't remember the last time we did that. I don't remember ever thinking about whether or not their
No, the systems were
systems
compatible.
were going to be compatible and what that might involve if they're not.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and we've
Did
been
we
with
just-
that
did we
same
just-
auditor for,
Yeah.
I mean, how many years?
Yeah.
Before I was, forever, yeah. It's-
We may want to update that.
And we debated that in the last, you know, go around. We don't have a lot of interest in our audit because it's a very small
Yes.
governmental audit. And I think that auditor has all but one or two of the airports in the state.
That's what I.
Yeah, and we've RFP'd several times in
And
the
only had one or
last
two
2
others.
decades, but we get 1 or 2 others, and it's a huge difference in price.
Yeah, and I think this year, do you remember what we're paying?
I don't-
I want to say it's $7,500, but that may not be right. It might be 9 now. It's not a big audit. You know, so and again, I don't want to put them through a tremendous amount of work for stuff that we're not using.
But it should only happen once they have the system.
Well, that's true, and they only have 1 more year though, is that right? Before we RFP again, or is it 2?
We need to look at it.
Yeah, it's 1 or 2, it's not very many because we're already in our 2nd or 3rd year.
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
You know, what's actually in the audit report outside of what's required, to me, is irrelevant.
Right.
You have accounting for 2 reasons. One is an external audit, and one is internal use
Right.
for the board and management to make timely decisions.
Yeah.
So as long as you have that information,
Right.
we have that information, you could go pull it for a board meeting, you could go pull it for whatever we're looking at to analyze. Whether it sits in the back of this audit report or not, to
Right.
me, is kind of a moot point.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many people are back there flipping through there, but
No.
not very many.
And really the one, you know, and Sharon and I talked about this years ago when I first got here, why do you have those schedules in there? Because it's just more information that somebody could say is wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and the biggest reason you would have it is it gives the airlines more information they could look at. I mean, that's the only reason I can think of it. But at the same time, you know, why do we want that in there? Now that we're on an ordinance rate system, we can change our allocations every year. You know, so we have even less of a reason now to want that in there. You know, in fact, we don't even have to keep the same cost centers anymore. And so, you know, as I've been looking at the accounting system this year and thinking about it, you know, I think, you know, in the next year or 2, we may well collapse some of those cost centers because there's really, I mean, other than when Rod and now Sydney and I sit down and start looking through the budget and thinking about, you know, what monies we need in what places, you know, that's about the only time of year we talk about most of those cost centers is during that budget process. And so, you know, looking ahead, you know, we probably don't want that stuff in the financial report and the back stuff. The revenue stuff, I would like to continue to have that because that is how the public will understand our business. You know, as like I was saying to Sydney, I mean, what we have in there right now, if we don't recreate that information, is $4 million in revenue. Well, how did we get $4 million in revenue? This year's a pretty complex discussion. Well, FedEx's debt service stopped halfway through the year, and so that became revenue instead of being something we were, you know, taking in and paying out. It became real revenue. You know, yet parking is down 40%. You know, so and unless you talk about each one of those individual things, it's hard for anyone to really grasp what happened. You know, the expense side is less so because, you know, we take some of our employees and allocate them to the terminal, you know, and that's how we get terminal expenses. We don't really have an employee that's stationed in the terminal all day doing something to the terminal. You know, so, I mean, it's really a false, you know, accounting of what's happening here, not false in the sense of,
Yeah.
but, it's not a real thing. I mean, you're not out here painting the building every day, and that cost goes directly there. You're over here, doing some maintenance, and it's part of someone's job, not an entire job. So, yeah, I don't think we need all the supplementary schedules in the back. Revenue, I do think we need to find a way that every year we're working with the auditor, and we all agree those numbers are the numbers, and that's what we maintain, throughout all of our financial systems to make it easier to budget, make it easier to explain to the airlines, make it easier to explain to the public. Did that make sense? Anything you want to add to that?
I mean, just that for this fiscal year, I was able to go in and create these tables, and I just sent that to John and the auditor today. And the auditor is going to take a look at that. And ultimately, it all ties out to the audited operating revenue and expenses. It's just the detail in there I had to put together because it didn't map right in their system. But I do think that there is a way to make more GL accounts rather than item codes, so it flows to the profit and loss, and they can map that
They can map
themselves.
that better.
And that's something that I'll be looking at, is how we can take, that list of item codes and reasonably make it, not an overwhelming amount of GL accounts, but enough that, the details there.
Yeah, I mean, when you really drill down to even rental car, and you look at the revenue, they have space rent for parking spaces, they have counter rent, which really doesn't change due to activity, and it might change due to rate, because we changed the rates. Then on top of that, they have concession fees, which are based on how much money they take in. So even, breaking that down into the categories it breaks down into, you got a building rent, a concession fee, and a space rent, a ground rent. So I mean, it really takes quite a bit of thought. And when we're budgeting and when we're explaining to the airlines, we all know that verbiage. We know the lingo, we know how those contracts work, so we're able to converse in that world. And so what we've got to do is make the accounting figure out a way to break that apart into categories that make sense for the accounting. And David, being new to airports on the financial side, took a pretty good shot at it with item codes. And I thought that was going to work out well, but it doesn't work out well with the accounting system. We're going to have to back up and, like she said, probably set up some new GL accounts so that we can map those directly to where they're going to roll into to give us those financial reports.
You like that idea, Todd?
Sure. Again, it's more of a, not what the auditor wants or needs, but what do we want in there? And what do we need in there? And what could we, if one person once a year needed something, we could print something and go, here it is.
Here it is,
But
yeah.
it doesn't need to be sitting in the back of our audit report necessarily,
Yeah.
just because we've done it the last 15 years.
Right.
That's my point. So we don't want to spend a ton of time doing something that literally no one will look at.
There's no
But you'll
customer.
go, it all ties out, and everybody go, congratulations. Who's on the budget committee, by the way? I know we-
Tony, Casey, and Rich.
Can you send me a copy of the draft
Yeah.
whenever they have? You
Yeah.
thought it would be a couple weeks, maybe?
Yeah, I think probably will be, I don't know what the time is looking like to get everybody together, but I would think we could probably put together an MD&A draft in the next week, don't you think?
I think so.
Yeah.
We have, all the detail there, we just have to put it together.
Yeah. And then I think we'll probably get a draft audit next week.
I reached out and asked if there's availability next week for that meeting. I haven't heard back yet.
Okay, yeah, so they're still trying to get it pulled together.
So even without the MD&A, if you get something,
Yeah.
a draft from the audit.
Yep, we'll get it to you. Yep. All right, any other questions on that?
Two things. While we're on, since we had such a small meeting last month, a lot of people missing, Dave and myself volunteered for the RFQ for the engineering firm committee. Basically, as nobody else, for very few people were here to volunteer. Does anybody have a desire? It's very interesting, I've done it before, to be on that committee for that.
Yeah, I'll jump on that.
Okay. If you want, are you willing to give that up to let Casey participate in that?
Well, you'll have to, don't give it up just for me.
No, it's fine.
We can have it.
He was looking forward to you having it, but I didn't want to throw it. So we'll put Casey on that one. Sound good? And then one last totally off the wall with all this 9.5 million coming. Right now, in our long-term plan, what is our idea of putting in additional gates? Moving, extending one way or the other. I mean, we might be in a position where we thought far enough ahead with the opportunities coming up, and it might be worth looking at adding an extension onto the building.
We have, well, 9.5 won't come close to it.
No, I know.
But you know, we have quite a bit of gate capacity right now, if you think about it. You know, Delta only has 2 flights a day and they've got 2 gates. You know, and Alaska is going to drop to 5 days a week and they've got a whole gate. And then Allegiant, you know, might get this year, you know, 4 flights a week, you know, something like that, and they have a whole gate. So if you look around the state at what new service would look like, it's most likely to be seasonal summer to start for a number of years. So we have a lot of capacity in the existing building for gate space.
Okay.
The de-icing ramp, which if, you know, if the bids come in reasonably well this summer, you know, when that gets built, that's going to create 3 or 4, it's 3, isn't it, Chris? Parking positions over there on the other side of the terminal ramp. And one of our goals for having that project is in the summertime, that gives us our wind parking immediately off the gate. So a few years ago when United had that 4-week Denver plus Chicago, you know, they had basically a 25-minute gap between Denver 1 and Chicago. And so that would be an ideal situation where the pilot can go out, grab his plane, you know, flight check, you know, anything he needs to do prior to getting to the gate, drive over to the gate, pick up passengers and go. So, you know, that project, is gonna, you know, I used that same model when I was at SeaTac. I always call it 4-man gates because, you know, for a piece of concrete, you can get essentially a gate extension. And I think that would see us through a number of years. 5 gates for us should get us, well, what's Missoula right now before the expansion? Do you know, Scott, offhand?
It was 6, including 1 ground.
1 ground spot. So I mean, essentially that's where we're going to be, you know, and Missoula now is twice our size. You know, so I mean, we should have a lot of capacity with what we've got. And just simply, you know, getting the airlines to work together on schedule and everything. With the ticket counter, where we're short right now is ticket counter. We really don't have any extra positions, and we have all dummy counters. There isn't any common use element to any of our counter space. So when we do this ticket remodel, we're going to have at the end of the building, is it 6 positions, do you remember, Scott? 6 new vacant spots at the end. And what we're going to do with those is every one of those is going to get a big screen TV. And that's how, if you know, the guys that come in seasonally are going to put up their codes. So when they come in, they'll put a thumb drive in that says Allegiant. You know, they'll put a thumb drive in that says Frontier. And, you know, we'll be able to switch that counter over between airlines that are only flying seasonally or occasionally. That counter will also be tied into the baggage system so that everybody's bags go to the same place and get screened. So where we're short on capacity now is in the waiting lobby and the ticket counter and that type of space, and we're planning to fix that with those projects. Gate space, we're probably still a ways off from really needing that gate space. But, you know, ideally, you know, if we could get on the, you know, the rapid growth plan that everyone else has, I mean, we might be 4 or 5 years out. Our current plan with that 9.5 million, I mean, first of all, we're facing a wall of escalation like I've never seen before. I mean, last year's bid was almost 100% over budget. You know, and so, I mean, a lot of that is going to get sucked up into it costs a bunch more to build, frankly. But what it will allow us to do is to escalate forward all of this terminal work that we've been talking about for a few years without taking on a whole bunch of debt, which I'm pretty excited about because you may recall back when we did that terminal charrette 2 years ago, we really expected we would be coming and borrowing 25 million, you know, or something in that range, maybe not quite that much, but you know, something in that range. And now all of a sudden we have 4.7 million for the ticket counter. We have another 9.8 million to help us get the facade fixed. And we've got our PFC revenue back because we retired debt. So that all of a sudden, over the next 5 years, is an extra million or two. Hey, that's within reach now. So, and by the way, we've grown our revenues exponentially in that same time frame because the parking lot and some of these other leases that we've brought in. And so, we're able to afford some things on pay-as-we-go basis that I didn't think we would be able to get to. So, I mean, my plan right now, and again, escalation could foil everything, but my plan right now is we may not need to borrow. If anything, we might need a line of credit that we're into here and there to allow us to get out and borrow $1 million to go build that taxi lane this summer so that we can get those GA tenants under development. At the same time, we're spending another $1 million to put in utilities that the city's going to pay us back for a year later. So we've got these temporary borrowing needs. That taxi lane will be paid back to us from entitlements the following year in 23, or potentially, if everything falls out right with the $9.8 million, we might even get it this year. We might be able to draw on that money this year and get it, pay ourselves back now and not even have to extend. So I think that, that money, it's going to allow us to do the things we want to do quicker and without debt and keep the airline rates exceptionally low. And so we're really going to be setting the table well for some airline growth. With the way this money's coming in, it's really terrific that we're going to be in that position.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay, are we ready to get to the business at hand?
Yes, sir.
Okay, real quick, any agenda items that present a conflict of interest and subsequently require a member to abstain from discussion and vote for our itinerary? Excellent. Number 1, PFC application number 6.
Yes, it's as I mentioned before, every PFC application allows you about 5 years of collection. The current FAA structure for PFCs is you can collect a maximum of $450. And so the way that works, the airport with the originating ticket gets $450, the destination airport gets $450, and then all of the connecting airports, no matter how many there are, have to split the 2 additional $450s. And so, because we have no connecting traffic, we generally get $450 for every single passenger going through, which is good news. And so we generate $600,000, $650,000 per year in PFC revenue. $675 as we begin to grow is kind of what we figure we'll average during this next 5-year period, which is quite a bit of money that we can apply to the terminal. And so what FAA asks that we do is we put together a list of projects that we intend to use those dollars for. We send those out to the airlines and have a consultation meeting. Generally, they want to see that we're doing things that lower their costs and are responsible. I mean, they hate the idea of big grandiose plans. And so we've always historically had pretty good support for our PFC projects. And I think in this case we will also. PFCs and Airport Improvement Fund grants share the same basic eligibility requirements. Generally speaking, you can build capacity-related types of things, infrastructure-related types of things. It even allows for increased competition, so we can build some things that might increase the amount of competition in our market. PFCs have a little more latitude on baggage, where we can use the PFCs for the movement of bags and people and cargo and people. So PFCs have a little bit broader language there. And so as you can see, what we're planning to use those PFCs for over the next 5 years include a portion that would go to the terminal project for the ticket counter. We would use about $500,000 of PFC collections to replace some of the baggage belts in that area that wouldn't be eligible for TSA. There's likely to be a small carousel, for instance, where the airlines would pick up their bag once it gets screened. That would be the type of thing we could use those PFC dollars for in that application. The second project we plan to use it for is to renovate the covered walkway. Rod and I met with LPW last week to look at some concepts for reutilizing the existing structure out here. Scott and I were talking about it some, and Chris and I were talking about it some, about some ideas of how we can make that system look a little better, renovated, newer, and accomplish some of what we need to do with it. Really, that structure faces a couple of challenges. First of all, the water goes essentially nowhere. It comes down on these roofs, funnels down eventually to a pipe where it ends up on the back of the walkway and goes underneath the sidewalk. Obviously, that's the primary problem we're having with the sidewalk. And so we need to reroute that stormwater. There's very little lighting under that canopy today. If you walk under there, the lights are sparse. They're not really helpful in the early morning hours. And we needed to relight that entire structure. The signage program, the signs are unlit. They're in pretty poor condition. Looks like one of them's been hit by a camper, or maybe our snowplow, I don't know. Those need to go. And so renovating that structure has its challenges. We definitely want to replace the roofing system, all of it, if not the majority of it. Try to get rid of as much of that flat roof, which is hard to maintain, as possible, and go to a guttered system where we can get everything into the storm drain. You may recall last month, our airport improvement project that we plan to do this summer is to replace the entire walkway. That's going to give us the opportunity to put a stormwater pipe under the covered walkway. So we'll be replacing all of that sidewalk, installing a stormwater pipe. We'll be bringing all these roofs off of the existing structure down into those pipes and getting rid of the stormwater that way. And then we plan to get rid of the majority of this flat roof. The idea that LPW has is to actually saw off these higher sections, like you can see here. They're kind of an eyesore, and as you know, you can see those all the way on the second floor, all the way down the building. Their plan is actually to saw that off, so we've got one roof elevation. We'll clad the exterior of that roof with the same metal paneling we used on the back side, that kind of graphite aluminum gray color. So that'd be clad. That would allow us the opportunity to hide the electric behind that cladding. On the inside there or the bottom, so we can run electric down and put lights with regular intervals down the walkway, really light up these atrium areas. Once that ceiling is down to flat, we'll have some type of pitch structure that'll go from that all the way back to the building. So we'll kind of have a pitched, either a pyramid or just kind of a pitched roof that'll go over that'll allow us to collect the stormwater in one place, get it to a gutter. We'll also add a nice architectural element in there. Inside those, we're going to have some lighting, some uplighting that we can change the color on potentially from different parts of the year. That'll make those entrances identifiable from the parking lot. When you park your car way out there in the abyss of 4 in the morning, and deep winter's morn, you can look across and see that lighted entry in there. That's how I can get into the building. We'll have some signage on that band of concrete in the front there, which will be aluminum clad. And so, that'll all be one elevation, clad in metal. We talked today about the possibility of a metal roof on a slight cant that would get the water to a gutter, something that would look nice. When you're looking at the top of it, you'd see a uniform structure across the top, and allow us to collect all that storm water that's trying to get down through that membrane roof today. Then on the front of the columns, LPW has come up with a great concept. They want to pour a nice concrete ring at the bottom of those concrete columns that would go up maybe a foot. I even like the idea, maybe coming up 2 feet, gives us something really nice to smack into with a plow. And then above that, we get some plate steel and actually have plate steel wraps on those columns, get kind of a cool industrial look, but something super rugged that people could hit and not damage. And so protecting those columns, I think the overall look of it's really nice. We can probably bring some renderings to that January meeting where we talked about the baggage claim too. I think that'll really modernize that front and give us a first start on modernizing the front of the building. So we think that project's about $800,000, quite a bit to accomplish there, to get that walkway so we're not replacing it every 10 years, get that stormwater out of there. The building front also drains into that same area. So the covered walkway, or the sidewalk project this summer, will capture all that water too and get it out of there. And then this project will allow us to capture the gutter and funnel it into that new sewer system. So I think that's a good project. The terminal exterior renovation, we're pegging that at about 3.4. I actually think it's going to be more than that. We've got to get some estimates on that. I think it's probably likely to be 5 or 7 million. It's going to be quite a bit higher than I expected. The metal panel systems are getting much more expensive right now. That's one of the escalation items that's really going up. But the idea here would be to clad the building with a metal panel system that would provide some insulation and some reflectivity. Those of you that have been around concrete enough know that each one of these pillars right here just leaks heat, and in the wintertime allows plenty of heat to come through in the summer. So we'd like to clad the majority of that core in the front with a metal panel system that would really give us a modern look, similar to the back of the building. There'd be an insulation level or layer behind that cladding to provide some airspace in between the exterior and the what is in a lot of cases our interior wall, the concrete. We'd also look to replace the windows in that same project. These windows are the original 1970s window. I'm sure most of the argon is gone, and the heating R factor on that's not great. In addition, there's not a tremendous amount of shading in those windows, so we get a lot of complaining from the airlines for about a week every year when that sun just comes directly in those windows and hits the ticket counter. They have a hard time seeing. So we want to probably add a little bit of tinting to those windows so that in the summertime we're not taking all that radiant energy. And that would allow us the opportunity, in talking to some of the engineering folks, we think we can probably take out about every other caisson in here to make those windows larger, which would provide a much nicer view shed out the front of the building when we do that. And so that's one of the things we're looking at doing in that project. We expect about $2 million of that project would be funded with PFCs in our PFC application. Then lastly, we want to do a terminal second floor lobby renovation. That would more or less take that area out from the admin offices and make it more of a comfortable seating area for people. We'd like to add a fireplace, a central element in there that people could gather around. That would provide that Montana moment when you walk in through the exit lane from the secure area, something that people would sit around while they're waiting for folks. Of all the airports I've been to since 9/11, proportionately, this airport has more pickups than I've ever seen anywhere else. We get a lot of people up here to pick up family. And so providing that element, that place where people reunite, I think that's a great place to do it. And having a central element like a fireplace there would really add to the environment. We've vented up through the ceiling. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Mini Glacier, but they have a historic fireplace there that I thought we might look to emulate, maybe even work with the Park Service on doing something like that, we get something that looks a little bit like that, or another lodging facility around, vented up through the ceiling and provide a little bit of warmth there in that central terminal. Some new furniture in there, probably a little bit of new lighting and some signage. We plan to use PFCs for that, about $500,000. We need to do flooring in that area too. Ideally, this will be the last piece of flooring we have left that we haven't replaced by the time we get to it. I think the first floor will have largely done either from the ticketing project, which will take place hopefully by this next summer, and the atrium project over on that side when we replace the doorway to the rental car area. We're replacing all that flooring out in that area. So this will be the last little bit of flooring. And it's in fairly good shape, so I think we can probably get it to last a few more years, but we do need to replace it. So those are the projects that will be in the next PFC application. If the board approves it, we'll be getting this out to the airlines here shortly, and we'll begin the public the required public comment process, and then moving towards collection on this PFC later in the spring.
All right, can I get a motion authorizing a new PFC charge application in the approximate amount of $3.8 million to fund the projects contained or as previously discussed? Okay. We have a motion. Any discussion? Anybody want to talk about any of those projects or any thoughts on the PFC charge? All right, no further discussion. Can I have a motion, a second motion to accept it as discussed? All right. Looking for second. I'm sorry. Looking for a second. So we have a motion and a second with no further discussion. All in favor of accepting the new PFC charge application, the approximate amount of $3.8 million to fund the projects discussed, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Continue. All right.
Thank you.
And the next task order number 30, Southwest GA Improvement. Engineering design and bidding.
Yeah, it's that time of year where we start construction or start design on our construction projects for the next summer. And our construction project that we have in question here is the Southwest GA taxi lane. This is the project that would extend the existing taxi lane, what we used to call the Red Horse taxi lanes, back into the general aviation development area. So essentially we'll be taking this is now old, even though it's not that old. We basically extended a taxi lane down this way, which meets up with a stub that goes into here where Eagle Jet sets. And so as we sit today, there's about 5 hangar pads that sit on the existing Red Horse taxi lane that are ready for development, and we've actually leased 2 of those. Is it just 2 now? We've already leased 2 of those 5. By extending that taxi lane all the way back here to the frontage road, we'll be opening up 2 more development areas back in there. One of them is for fairly large hangars, 60 by 80s, and some 80 by 100s back in there too, isn't there? So there'll be some larger hangar pads, and then all the way at the back here, we've got an area for some additional T hangars. And so the person we're talking to that would like to develop T hangars plans to start out with a pod of 5. So they're basically, if you look at the way these develop, they look like a T. Plane pulls in and the wings are kind of wide, when it pulls in, and that creates space for a T on the other side. So it's T's back and forth, kind of nesting the plane in there so that you can fit doors on either side of it. And so that's what he plans to do. There'd be basically 4 T hangars, and on the end there would be 1 larger hangar on the end of the building that would span across the entire way. And that would he's even thinking of using that as a restroom potentially. As you know, there's some people down there that are passionate about having a restroom down at that end of the airfield. And so they're talking about either that or it would just be 1 large hangar site. And so that development would happen kind of in this area here. Then once that 5 is filled, he would plan to continue building that kind of 5 model to continue to build T hangars in that area. And so this project would allow us to extend that taxi lane back into that GA area and more or less complete that area of taxi lane for development. On the opposite side of that taxi lane over here, the master plan shows the Air Museum. That's the Bravo 369 guys that we continue to talk to. I hear from them every few months. But even if that doesn't happen, what we'd probably do is replan that area for more hangar space if there really is demand. Things are definitely changing in here in terms of hangar demand. I mean, the entire time I've been here, I think there's been maybe 3 or 4 hangars built aside from the 1 large hangar and the large hangars that Dwight's built, 3 or 4 private hangars, as we would call them. Now we're getting regular calls about interested folks wanting to build. Whether or not they can afford to build is another question. But having additional space ready to go on the opposite side of that taxi lane would give us many years of development, likely, in a market our size. So this taxi lane would initially be built to neck down to Group 1, essentially the smallest planes, because that's what would fit in those T hangars. But on the opposite side of that taxi lane, where none of that area is developed yet, we can retain the ability to expand that taxi lane in that direction to widen it so that we can get larger planes back in there. Probably just Group 2, not Group 3. Group 3, the 737, for example, is a Group 3 plane. We have limited demand for that kind of hangar, and we can fit 2 more hangars the size of Eagle Jet next to Eagle Jet. And the next one can even use the same fire suppression system. So if we had that type of development, we would expand to the south of that area. This development allows us to get the smaller planes back into that area in the back. And so we want that area as far back as we could fit it because the taxi lane is very much cheaper to build because it's less dense, less material under it, and narrower. So we want the smallest planes in the back and the bigger planes towards the front, just much cheaper to develop that way so we don't have to have a massive deep taxi lane the entire way back there for larger planes. This is the design, design portion of the project. We anticipate it'll be about a $200,000 project. You got an IFE on that, Rod, right?
Yeah.
So we got an independent fee assessment from an engineer in the last week, and how did that come in?
Engineer's estimate was $206,282, and the independent, or excuse me, that's the independent fee estimate, and H2M Hills was $188,503, so they were pretty close, and that's just in comparison there. So our budget, what we're asking for is $200,000. That would be AIP fundable from the FAA. We may carry that cost
well, I'm sorry, the design we can actually pay for with this year's entitlements, so we'll go ahead and get reimbursed for that now. We may carry the cost of construction for an entire year. We think it's important enough for us to get this taxi lane in the summer before we see a lot of escalation on asphalt. Oil prices are actually coming down right now. While there's a lot of focus on that, it's probably a good time to bid January, February, get that project in, and then reimburse ourselves from 2023 grants. There is an outside chance, again, no one knows what's happening with the 9.5 in terms of timing, but there's an outside chance that that money might come to us soon enough that we could go ahead and use those funds to pay for this now, and then reprogram our 2023 dollars to something else. And so no one knows any of that yet. So we may have a year that we're carrying that cost. The full cost of construction is going to be about another $1 million, which we would be carrying for that full year, but it would get us started on some development down there and we would get reimbursed. Most likely it would be early next year. The FAA typically can do reimbursements earlier in the year than they would a project grant. So we might see that in March of 2023. And we probably wouldn't finish spending on the construction until, say, October, November of 2022. So we really only have probably a 6-month carry of that full $1 million, but some of that carry would likely start in June if we decide to proceed. And so that decision is down the road. We'll come back to the board before we do a construction notice to proceed to ensure the board's okay with carrying those dollars. The $200,000 we have for this project this year will be paid out of our AIP funds. Have we determined yet if there's a match on this, Chris?
There will be a match, yes.
There will be a match. Okay, so one thing I will note on this has been up in the air. It's not exactly $200,000 from the entitlements. It would actually be $20,000 local, $180,000 from AIP, because we're going to have to match this year. We initially thought it was going to be 100% this year, but apparently it's not going to be.
And you want to talk just a little bit for the board on the fact that that's just the one main feeder stub, that the individual taxi lanes that go to any new ones or have to be purchased by them?
Yeah, so in 2019, the FAA issued some new guidance, and we didn't have a conference in 2020 to really discuss it because of COVID, but their new guidance is we're not allowed to build pavement 50 feet out from the front of a hangar building and use federal dollars for it. In years past, you were able to build, sort of the rail of the ladder and the rung, and then the tenant would build an apron out in front of the building. So ideal development, you would have an apron large enough to hold the plane that once they pull it out of the hangar, so they can close the hangar door or hug people that are staying there or whatever they're trying to do before they get in the plane and leave. And so there would be enough room there to taxi past that airplane without obstructing the taxi lane function. With this new guidance, which is problematic for a lot of reasons, we're not allowed to build that rung of the ladder any longer with federal dollars. As you all probably recall, getting the utilities into that area down there was extremely expensive, and we increased the rental rate to 20 cents for anyone using the utilities to help compensate for that from more or less 10 cents prior, so we nearly doubled the rental rate. Well, the cost of building that taxi lane would add further burden on that rental rate if we're ever going to recover it, because we don't have a way to pay for any of it with our federal dollars. So it has to come out of our reserves, like the entry road, like many other things the FAA is asking us to pay for now. And so realistically, the only two options that I could recommend to the board would be, number one, we increase the rental rate to recover that cost over a reasonable period of time, be it 10 years or 20 years or 15 years, whatever the board would want to do. Or number two, we go back to the tenants and say, if you guys build your own taxi lane down through there, we'll give you cost recovery from the neighbor across the taxi lane. So for every linear foot of development that somebody builds a hangar down that taxi lane opposite the tenant, we'll go back and charge that new tenant that cost to repay the initial tenant in there. And so, those are the two models I've seen done. And unfortunately, and Scott and I were talking about this, unfortunately, the net effect of what's going to happen with this type of development is you're going to have a lot of people that simply don't build the apron any longer. Instead of having 25 feet for your airplane and then another 30 feet for the taxi lane, and then the other guy behind that on the other side having 25 feet, you're going to see a lot of hangars crammed in on 40 feet of pavement, and it's going to be called ramp, which doesn't have to be striped and doesn't have any control, and it's a free-for-all in order to keep the costs down. And so what that means is if one guy's pulling his hanger out, everybody upstream from him isn't going to be able to get by. And so, I guess they can do it at Walmart, so it's not the, it's not the worst, plan, it's not as artful and well-designed as you'd like to see it. Now, fortunately, in our case, these runs of hangars are going to be fairly small, 5 or 6 hangars, maybe in the case of the T hangars, you might have a total of 10 different airplanes down that run of T hangars. If you go out to our T hangars today, it's rare to see 2 of them getting ready at the same time. So maybe we can sustain that. It's just not ideal. And it's unfortunate the FAA has made this decision because it's going to result in airports like us who don't have tremendous demand for GA, where a lot of people are willing to throw money at whatever they have to throw money at to build hangars. There's 3 40,000 square foot hangars under construction at Bozeman. I'm sure their taxi lanes are plenty wide. But in our case, most of these folks are on a tight budget. There's not a tremendous amount of demand, and so we're going to end up with a much less desirable operation out there than what we would have in the past. And so, I frankly think, given these constraints, the best thing to do is likely to have the tenant pay for that asphalt, because if we do it, we're going to have to do it to some standards that they don't have to do it to. Most of these airplanes that are out there are lighter on the pavement than a lot of cars. So it's not a difficult section that they're trying to build. They can go to practically any pavement contractor and say, I need essentially a road, down through here, and that should suffice for 20 years. But it's unfortunate that we won't be able to continue to build those taxiways. And it leaves us, and I've pointed this out to FAA already, it leaves us with legacy problems now. Because my question to the FAA is, this pavement was all built with federal dollars. When that needs replaced, and it's not far from needing replaced, well, who's doing it? The FAA doesn't like it when we use tenant money inside an area that was previously paid for with AIP dollars. So if we do a maintenance course out there, a fog seal or something like that, they won't pay for it. I don't know that, I guess if we're 20 years down the road, we could have a tenant do it, or we've got to pay for it out of our reserves. It really creates a lot of legacy problems that, we have a relatively small GA area. Most airports have much more GA. So it is a problem. We've talked to the potential builder out there, and they're willing to pay for the cost of that asphalt to build the rung of the ladders. I've been saying only 2 rungs of the ladder back there, but they would prefer
in front
that.
of the T hangars.
In front of the T hangars, they would prefer that to to having us put it in the rental rates. So that's what we're proceeding on as we get closer to construction on this project. We'll be talking to you guys about how we want to do all of those things.
And I assume that we have the ability, as the authority, to put setbacks on those hangar spaces so that you don't get too close in between hangars. I'm assuming that you can't. You can set a point where they can't move the hangar in front of this point.
Yeah, I think we would want to have some clearance, between them. However, what I would say is, economically, we can't allow that to be too much.
No.
Because it's going to be costly to pave that area. That is a lot of pavement when you really think about it. It's probably about as much pavement as we're going to be building up here.
You got a lot of airplanes with a 50-foot wingspan too.
There shouldn't be any back here. These hangars will be built for, what's the max plane there, Chris?
It'd be like a King Air.
So that's what, 30?
No, it's larger than that.
No, it's bigger than that.
These T hangars will fit. They're not going to fit a T hanger.
You can put it.
Those are, I think,
you can put a Seneca in there.
About 40, 42 I think is what,
So you're talking 43.
yeah, 42 I think is what
And you got to put at least 10 feet on the
plan
side of
was.
that. So
Yeah.
looking at setback.
Well, the county has requirements too, as well as fire. Once
side's gotta be a fire rated wall.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's gonna be a challenge, you know, losing that funding.
All right, good update. Okay, can I have a motion to authorize to negotiate a scope and execute a scope of work for the design of the Southwest General Aviation Taxi Extension?
Make a motion as stated.
I have a motion. Any further discussion on the Southwest Taxi Extension plan? All right, no further discussion and a motion. Any second?
Second.
Dave, you're looking to make a second, I can tell.
Second.
There you go. With a motion and a second, all in favor of the authorizing the airport to negotiate and execute a scope of work for the design of the Southwest General Aviation Taxi Extension, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes. Okay. I think that's all for that. Let's go with Airport Authority Board comments. Mr. Gibbs. Mr. Lalonde. Mr. Timbo. Mr. Eritz. Mr. Smith. Ms. Evans. I have no further. How about additional public comments? I have no additional public comments. With no further business to come before the board, I declare this meeting adjourned. Let's take 5 for coffee, cookie, and pit stop, and we'll be back at 4:00 after. We'll call that 7 minutes and 20 seconds. How's that sound?
Did you say you'd be back at what?
40 after.
Oh.
I got 32, so 14:40.
Gotcha.
Sorry, military.
Yeah, got that.
Yeah, we need more money around here, so we can build a whole lot of.
Holy jeez.
Poor health women.
I know. Yeah, I'm glad he brought up the county reform. That's- I never thought about that.
Yeah, I know she was going on the way, she's like, oh, yeah.
So, the existing, there's gonna be a more money. They want a different look.
It may be.
I can't see it.
I know.
We retire and they want a different look.
It's crazy. I mean,
Speaking of hangers,
the FAA is trying to stop out all aviation activity. Pretty rough.
I'll put something else on that. Warren Smith wants to know we are on his-
Back or something.
I need to get back to him. He doesn't want to build, and I don't want to give
How
him
you doing,
money. He doesn't
John?
want to build, and he even said, I don't.
I don't know, day to
Just
day,
want to
it
hold
just.
the land. And we've been through this.
When I saw
This is
that
the third
news
time
about
we're
the
gonna
announcement
go
of
through
testing,
this. There's people who want
I could just imagine you
actually
running
build.
around.
I mean, I know
getting
money
it
is
set up
money,
and
but there's
going,
people
and
who actually want to
It's
build.
like, oh, I'm
So
sure.
I'll get back to
That came
him.
out of the blue.
It did, and nobody
Yeah.
knew how much it
I've got him
cost.
on my
Finally,
list.
John's people called Sunday
Yeah.
evening, and, because I'd asked them,
And
like,
it's
well, how
just,
much is it?
like I said,
And do we know what it's gonna be
I have
for?
other people.
And so finally,
And
they
maybe
called
not,
me
and
Sunday
so maybe they
afternoon
don't start paying,
and
but
said,
it's
hey,
just the
it's,
same
we've
thing
heard
as
it's
always,
9.5
and nothing ever
minimum,
comes
and it's
from
through
it.
some of the EIP programs. So, you know, because I mean, they wanted me to talk about what we
He's
would
always
use it
afraid
for.
of
I'm like,
not
wow.
having what he wants.
I gotta know what the rules are, because I'm gonna go out there and say we're gonna do one thing, and I'm gonna call from the FAA, say, no, you're not, you know, like that.
I'll get back to him. You can push that off of your little list.
No, they, you know, because they knew, I mean, they always know when it's gonna pass before, you know, I mean, I guess there's probably surprise votes, but I don't think there's very many. So he had called us out or something and said, hey, are you available Monday? And, you know, could the senator come? And so, you know, we scrambled around and got that set up. Originally, he wanted to do it at the construction site. You know, we were boring those utilities. And so we had planned all of that. Then that morning, they called early.
Getting settled in?
It's supposed to be in the morning, we better not do that. So we moved it here. Yeah, it takes some setup, but that was good. I mean, you know, he invited a bunch of people, and we had a little bit of a round table beforehand. You know, kind of talk about some of the challenges in Castle County. The chamber came up, and, you know, and for our part, you know, the two things that we said is we need less rules. You know, that's the 50-foot, you know, offset in the hangars. And, you know, and the other thing was, hey, you know, you're making it rain in every program except for SCASB, which makes no sense. Because SCASB is the one thing where we can put flight guarantees in place to help airlines reestablish these routes.
Well, she probably does.
Solidify the airlines because they know they have a profit guarantee, and it would help these markets recover, especially those markets that are willing to put some federal dollars or some local dollars into the kitty to go out and get a new route. And so, you know, John's actually trying to schedule meetings on that right now. And like I will tell him, it wouldn't take a lot of money. The average SCASB grant is $300,000 or $400,000. I mean, not 9.5. You know, I mean, if you had 9 million, I mean, holy moly, you could fund SCASB, you know, grants from practically every applicant. You know, I mean, but we don't want to do that,
I
right?
rated them all like that, so when they all came across, that we weren't shooting each other down. We
So,
were
but
anybody with black and
I'm
white
glad
stripes
you're
as
only
friends.
listening to that, because it really would be for us a big deal if we could get SCASB.
Looks like Minnesota.
The answer isn't gonna be, you know, we're gonna get 5 new flights from one of our existing carriers. It's gonna be, we're gonna get 1 new flight from 5 different carriers. You know, and that's the way Montana markets break it down now. You know, you got Jet, I mean, you look at those, you got Southwest, JetBlue, Frontier. You know, you had Avella, who's dropped out of the market, America. You know, I mean, that right there would be years ago for us.
And I was looking at all the Cyber Monday and Black Friday airline deals. As soon as you type in Great Falls, oh, it doesn't apply to us.
Yeah, there is no capacity for the end.
Because I said, are they even doing it?
February is the first time we're gonna get some.
Geez, that means you might have to be here in January.
And we're going to Orlando in January.
If they want it done, don't make
We can have it, so.
That'd be good.
We're going the week after.
You going down to Disney World or?
Well, we don't know, we're meeting some friends from Cincinnati there.
Oh, nice.
They have 4 villas reserved as a resort.